We're all in uncharted territory looking for ways to support our communities. At Dell Technologies, we're making sure small businesses have the right tech solutions. Dell Technologies advisors are here for you, from helping small businesses stay connected and productive while working remotely with Windows 10 and Microsoft Teams, to rapidly deploying remote work solutions that limit upfront costs with Dell Financial Services. We're standing by you every step of the way. Call 877-ASK-DELL. That's 877-ASK-DELL.
The Best of Golic and Wingo podcast is presented by Capital One. This is Banking Reimagined.
This is the Best of Golic and Wingo podcast.
It's so good to hear those music used somewhere else beside either, neither, or both on our show. Glad you're with us. Golic and Wingo, ESPN Radio, ESPN2. We are presented by Progressive Insurance. Mike Golic Jr., Trey Wingo here with you. Hope wherever you are, your Monday's off to a good start. You are safe and healthy. And I want you to think about this as we begin a new work week in the environment that we're in. As bad as things may be, at least you're not the Adidas executive that said, yeah, we can't really make a shoe for Michael Jeffrey Jordan.
Wow.
My God, that was one of the big takeaways from last night's 2 episodes of The Last Dance. Adidas said they couldn't put together a shoe. That was like the job, right? The job is for the shoe company to put together a shoe, and that was their reason they didn't, because Michael Jordan wanted Adidas.
I think episodes 5 and 6 were a reminder of what a different landscape we were dealing with when Jordan first came into the league, because to hear the phrase, a young upstart Nike, who were sort of like the outliers and the up and comers at the time, is a hilarious notion as we sit here today.
So the best thing I can do right now, especially for the younger generation, is give the comparison. Because this was about shoes. We'll get into what Spot Built offered, Adidas offered, and Bo, by the way, that's where Michael Jordan wanted to go, and we'll tell you why he flew to Nike and took that meeting, and someone you should always listen to in your life. Yeah. But he signed his deal with Nike. His first deal was $250,000. Zion Williamson just signed a $75 million deal. So you have a rookie in 1984 to a rookie in 2019. Someone else can do this isn't simple math. Yeah. What that percentage increase is from 250,000 to $75 million.
And one happened because of the other.
That's exactly right.
100%.
Every Nike deal, LeBron's was actually worth more. LeBron's was, I think, 87 or 90 million. Actually, who was it? Somebody offered LeBron more. It was Reebok actually offered LeBron $115 million, which he turned down. But yeah, every Nike deal, there should be a percentage going to Jordan, because Nike isn't Nike without Jordan taking a flyer on this upstart Nike.
Well, that's like every PGA Tour player, when they cash a check, should give it 10% to Tiger, because he's why the pot's that good.
Well, and I think just in general, I think it was I forget who it was on our air talking about this documentary, essentially saying if it were not for signature shoes and what Michael Jordan did for that notion, you're probably not getting a lot of what we've got now. The fact that he revolutionized the idea of, you can so specifically market, because we saw the Converse commercial leading into this whole scene talking about the current landscape of sneakers in the NBA back in 1984. It was all of these guys, and Converse was the big bad boss on the block.
They were.
In all this one. And it was that big group ad you saw with all those guys.
Trying to rap.
Magic,
Larry Bird trying to rap.
It
was
the outtakes had to be pretty brutal.
Yeah, you're not kidding. But basically Converse said, we can't market Michael Jordan above all these guys. So, sorry, we're out.
And it was Nike basically saying, hey, no, we believe not only in this guy, but then in the future idea. Now, you can take one athlete in particular and give them a platform, give them their own signature, and it's going to sell.
And to that point, it's going to sell. They were hoping they would sell $3 million worth of Michael Jordan shoes over 3 years?
Over the first 3 years, they wanted to sell $3 million worth.
And in the first year, they sold $126 million.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
Now, I don't know. Do you remember the first person you ever saw wearing Air Jordans?
No, I do not.
I remember, because we were in college at that time, and some guy we were doing intramural basketball in our fraternity league, and some guy showed up wearing the original Jordan 1s, and we were like, dang.
We were like, oh, wow. I wonder what they cost
got the
back
shoes.
then. Would you know that?
I wouldn't know
I think they were like
offhand, no.
$70.
I think they said it on one of the
I
ads
thought
that
they
we
did.
saw in the documentary.
Maybe they said
around $108.
$108 with tax, I think was the line. Yeah.
How about this for a money line? November 16th, 1984. Michael Jordan had played 10 NBA games at that point, and Jordan Brand wasn't yet created. Nike's stock price then was 11 cents.
Oh.
11 cents. The next day, Jordan wore the Nike Air Jordan for the first time in an NBA game and had one of his worst games of the season. He scored 15 points on 4 of 17 shooting in a loss to the Sixers and had a 23.5% field goal percentage. The shoes would come out in the spring of 1985. And like we said, all of those things about them wanting to hopefully sell $3 million worth of merch in the first 3 years and doing 126 in the first year.
And the reason we're kind of bringing this up, if you happen to not see episode 5 and 6 last night of The Last Dance, part of it was they showed Jordan playing his last game at Madison Square Garden in '98, and he broke out the shoes that he wore in the first game there back in 1984, the first Jordans that he wore when that shoe came out, and he wore the exact same shoe. And he said it felt like, because they showed some of the newer shoes there, the difference. It had to be like blocks of cement. It had to feel like on his feet.
Playing basketball in the Jordan 1 is one of the bravest things I think a person can do. Because I don't know, I own plenty of them, and I couldn't imagine actually hooping in that version of a Jordan. Like, it seems remarkable, but...
And that was the whole reason they were built. It just shows you how fast technology changes.
Exactly right.
But take a listen to this now. Oh, do we not have that? The little snippet from the last thing about the... Yeah, here we go. Here is the whole thing where Jordan is talking about the shoes that he wore to the Garden.
By halftime, my feet are bleeding. But I'm having a good game. I don't want to take them off.
Michael. Oh, my goodness. A number of the players and even 2 of the officials are laughing. Michael Jordan now has 40 points. And only one guy has this level of artistry. Spinning in the lane for the slam. And Spike Lee is all over Michael Jordan. And Michael has a few words by way of retort.
Well, he just told him that he couldn't guard him. He says, you can't guard me. You too little. Then he says, hey, you come out here. You come out. Spike said, I will, money.
Michael with 42, and if this was Michael Jordan's final game at Madison Square Garden, he leaves no doubt whatsoever that he exits just as he entered. The best there is.
Of course, it would turn out to not be his final game at the Garden.
I took the shoes off.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. He said his socks were bloody when he took the shoes off. There are people disputing that. Much like the Kurt Schilling bloody sock, there are people disputing and Jordan said there are pictures and or video of it, and there are those that are saying they'd like to see that, and they haven't.
Jason Ayer, the director, said, my crew is as good as it gets, and we haven't been able to find that yet.
Exactly. So interesting, but either way, he said his feet hurt pretty bad.
Yeah, which we can all believe. Again,
that we can believe.
The shoe he's wearing.
Yeah. So that was one of the things. The other thing we'll get into a little bit later is just how, if you are an alpha, as he was described at the 92 Dream Team, I think it was by Magic, right? Called him the Alpha last night, that you use whatever you can to find the edge. And that was something we saw repeatedly through the last 2 episodes of last night. Just whatever it was, whatever edge you felt like you needed to take, he was going to find it and get to that. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But speaking of that Dream Team, coming up, why going to the Dream Team was a twofold situation, and it wasn't just one player involved. It might have been another player and an ancillary effect, if you're willing to believe that. We'll get into all of that.
Golic
and Wingo.
and Wingo.
Mm-hmm. Trey Wingo and Mike Golic Sr. Hope your Monday's off to a good start. Golic and Wingo, ESPN Radio, ESPN2. Mike Golic Jr., Trey with Wingo here with you as we're still getting through 2 more episodes of The Last Dance, Sunday night, episodes 5 and 6. The Last Dance recap is brought to you by AT&T. So there was a lot to digest in last night's last 2 episodes. The competitive nature of Jordan, the whole issue with the shoes. And then they got to one of the more controversial parts of Michael Jordan's career, his gambling and what it was and what it wasn't. Because you saw throughout the first few episodes, but really in this one, like, all he wanted to do was basically fight in terms of try and find some way to prove that he was better than everybody else.
Yeah, this gambling thing is that so after Game 1 of the 1993 Eastern Conference Finals with the Knicks. Oh, by the way, those were great videos. Just when you had enough of the bad boys in Detroit and the Bulls, the Knicks and the Bulls going at it.
I mean, that team had Oakley, Anthony Mason,
and Patrick Ewing.
They were big boys.
It was
Xavier McDaniel.
There was some fisticuffs going on there. But after that Game 1 was over, Jordan kind of wanted to get away from it all, and he and his father and some others went from New York to Atlantic City, and he was there gambling. And he says until about midnight or 1 o'clock, but newspapers said he was out until 2:30. He did score 36 points that night, and there was a game the next night. So he went to Atlantic City, got back, the papers say, at 2:30, and there was a game that night. He did score 36, but the Bulls lost and fell behind 2-0 in that series. And then the whole thing started about gambling to the point where Jordan actually stopped talking to the media, and the whole gambling. Do you have a gambling problem? David Stern is all of a sudden commenting on the gambling. It kind of got really, really like a ball of fire.
You know what's a great way to convince people or try and convince people that you don't have a gambling problem? To do an interview with Ahmad Rashad wearing sunglasses indoors.
Well, that was the best part. I mean, even Ahmad alluded to that. It's like, yeah, it sounds great, but you're doing this thing with your sunglasses on indoors.
Yeah, you look like the guy that's got a gambling problem, so maybe someone needs to get with you style-wise and try and figure out how to portray that visually a little better.
I did love his one line, though, about that. I think it was in the interview with Connie Chung for NBC News. He said, I don't have a gambling problem. I have a competition problem.
That was the line to me, because gambling, I mean, so by the way, he stopped talking to the media after that, and then the Bulls won 4 straight and advanced to their 3rd straight NBA Finals. And then he did talk to the media to the point Mike brought up, and it was Ahmad Rashad, who basically that's who he drove around with, hung around with, and talked to the most there. But yeah, that was basically what he said. I don't have a gambling problem. I have a competitive problem. And David Stern, because it went to the league, they investigated, and the headline was no punishment for Jordan, and everybody. And I guess I remember back then even saying, what are you going to punish? Yeah. As they said, he broke no team rules. There were no curfew or anything.
Correct.
He broke no team rules, no league rules. He didn't do it. There were no rules like in the NFL had where you couldn't be in casinos and such. He went and he gambled. And he can gamble. As David Stern said, look at what he makes a year. He's going to gamble a lot. He did nothing wrong. If the team wanted to be mad at him for staying out until 2:30 in the morning, well, that's their issue to be. But as far as the gambling, there was no issues.
Well, and this is like the notion of how we look at this stuff in general, though. Like, you don't got a problem unless you're losing in most people's minds, right?
Right.
Like that's what it comes down to is, could Michael Jordan have had a gambling problem? Sure. None of us really know. None of us were in the casino with him, but he never lost all of his money on any of that.
He's worth $2.1 billion.
Yeah. But I guess that's the thing is you could still have a gambling problem if you are rich. The thing is that we only really start addressing it as an issue if you're losing tons of money or if it affects him on the court at all. Like, the bottom line is, again, like we see time and time again, no matter what you do off the court, if you are winning enough on it and if you are great enough on it, we don't really care.
Exactly. And to that point, Jordan Ayer, the director of the Last Dance, was on the Jalen Jacoby podcast, and he said Jordan wanted to address the issue of the gambling.
I got the sense he was eager to talk about gambling and the allegations and the reputation that he has. Being on the inside of it, Michael's worth almost $2 billion at this point. There is no amount of money that he's going to be able to gamble with someone else unless he's calling up Bill Gates and Bill's giving him 3.5 on the Orlando San Antonio game that night. It's not going to happen. So he's not gambling at this stage of his life, nor do I believe he was gambling at any stage of his life for financial gain. He's gambling because he loves games, loves it.
So before we get to the $57,000 check he had to write to somebody,
that may be the problem.
Yeah, as far as the competition, there were a couple of scenes. He was pitching quarters in the locker room with security guards, pitching quarters for $20.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what he was doing. And then on the plane, and this is true because I've been in these games. Let me tell you, real nervously. On the planes, he and some of the richer guys
Ron Harper
were playing cards. I think it was Will Perdue who was explaining this.
Yeah.
We're playing cards for thousands and thousands of dollars in the back of the plane. And in the front of the plane, Will Perdue said me and Steve Kerr and others were playing blackjack for $1 a hand. $1 a hand. He said Jordan would come up and say, what are you guys doing? So we're playing blackjack. And they're like, can I play? They're like, why do you want to play? We're playing $1 a hand. And he said, Jordan said to him, because I want to know that your money is now in my pocket. Yeah. I mean, that was the competitive edge of him. At some point, it didn't matter what the amount was.
And the security guard who he lost to while they were pitching quarters said the same thing. He took that $20 and I'm going to put it in my
pocket. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that, gambling in those regards, like, hell, I used to be on team planes where guys were rolling M&Ms down the aisle, and whoever M&M made it further to the back won whatever the pot was. Like, guys in pro locker rooms will gamble on pretty much anything.
Yes, they will.
Well, wasn't it your time at Notre Dame where you made up those water games just to be competitive in the locker room?
Trick shot Monday. You'll find a way.
Trick shot Monday. You're just trying who could be the best at anything, right?
Exactly. And with Jordan, like, this is again proof that, like, doing all of this stuff when you are a great basketball player means that we will find the positive spin on this, and we'll say you're the ultimate competitor regardless of what the situation may have actually looked like.
But then he did have to explain a check in court for a guy named, what was it, Slim Buller? Slim Buller, who he wrote a check for $57,000 for. He said it was a loan, but Buller got in trouble and was in court, was on trial, and Jordan had said, okay, I wrote it as I had a gambling debt to him. Yeah. So people started saying, okay, is he having gambling debt issues, and is that going to go into anything about games for him to have a say on games, of which he flatly denied, said, I like to just gamble, basically play. He says gamble on me and just gamble alone with me, like blackjack and things like that. And golf, obviously.
Look, you're right. He didn't break it when he went to Atlantic City. He didn't break any league rules, or there was no legality issues or team rules. But if you're gambling with a golf pro whose name is Slim, you're breaking a gambling rule. You never bet on a course with a golfer whose nickname is Slim. That is a red flashing warning sign right there. Stay away. Do not gamble with this guy.
I feel like doing it like Slim is just one of those names that automatically, like in most settings, will set off an alarm. Like, something's going on here.
Exactly.
Slim, huh?
This guy shows up with a toothpick in his mouth and a really tanned neck on the golf course and wants to press. You say no.
I think that's the issue. Jordan couldn't say no.
That's exactly right. And this all came out at the same time that book came out, Michael and Me, Our Desperate Cry for Help, and all that kind of stuff. So it was all wrapped into one thing that some people were obviously trying to sell something off Jordan, but when that check came out, I think it gave people a little pause.
Yeah, I think it made you raise an eyebrow a little bit.
Yeah, and then you realize that most of these guys were doing a lot. I mean, Charles Barkley talks about the millions of dollars he lost gambling. So make sure you tune into The Last Dance, a behind-the-scene look at the 90s Chicago Bulls dynasty. The series continues this Sunday, 9 Eastern on ESPN. And listen to the wrap-up podcast hosted by Jalen and Jacoby immediately following the broadcast. That's presented by State Farm and AT&T, available wherever you get your podcasts. So we'll have much more on this coming up throughout the morning, but coming up next, America's team signed a quarterback over the weekend, and it had nothing to do with Dak. Or did it?
Golic.
I tell you what, a great sports night last night, no doubt about it.
And Wingo.
What a day, what a show, what a time.
1, 2, 3, 4.
To Marcus Spears. Marcus, good morning. How are we?
Gentlemen, what's up, man? What's going on?
Well, do you want to get that one out?
So I'm wondering, Marcus, on The Last Dance last night, we were talking a lot, or Jordan was, about the gambling and the card games that go on the planes that can be on there for big money. And I know on our plane there was certainly Boo-Ray was the game back then, and certainly it got up there in money. I'm wondering if on your plane rides, if you were partaking in any of that.
It's funny you say that. I think Boo-Ray is a staple because we definitely had it in that pot, doubling every time, the situations arise. It got up there pretty quick. I'm not going to divulge more information than need be. There were cars bought. There was 20% down payments lost on homes. That is the kind of money that was either being won or lost in those Boo-Ray games. But I wasn't in them because I had a wife and kids, and I did not have the extra dough to possibly lose an Audi A8 in a Boo-Ray game. I'm going to just leave it at that.
I was about to say, very specific car make there, so obviously someone might have lost an Audi A8.
I played in those games occasionally, and for those that don't know Boo-Ray, there's a point point where you have to drop your hand if you're going to stay out. And it got to known by me very well that if I kept in my hand, I had to have basically a winning hand, because there was no way on God's green earth I was ever staying in if I wasn't sure I was going to possibly, be the winner. Oh, it's brutal.
God, yeah, no, Marcus, totally. Marcus was not involved in any of those games.
Never had an Audi A8 on the line
to confuse any of that otherwise, as Marcus Spears is here with us. So, Marcus, Andy Dalton getting in on some of the Boo Ray games in Dallas now. Did that signing, in your mind, have any effect on the Dak Prescott situation currently?
Well, I don't want to be one of the you guys know I can fly off the handle in situations like this. A part of me does, because probably a couple of weeks ago, I was saying, like, this. I know me and Shefty actually had it out on NFL Live, and I said, Shefty, it just doesn't feel like the number of years. At first it was the money, then number of years, then one of the conversations shifted early to, do they think Dak is worth being the highest paid quarterback? So think about it, guys. Think about how many different conversations we've had about Dak Prescott's contract situation. Think about the number of guys that have been signed for the Dallas Cowboys. And now you tell him, here's what I just have a hard time believing. I have a hard time believing that you just signed Andy Dalton, who was a 9-year starter in this league, has been to playoff games, and you are just settled on the fact that he's going to be a backup quarterback when you currently have no contract with your perceived franchise guy. I don't know if you guys can go through history of the NFL, but I don't remember a young, capable guy that has been a starter in the league for 9 years to come in as a backup during a contract dispute with a proposed franchise guy and it not mean that it's either a leverage play or we're preparing not to have the guy that we thought we would have who's perceivably our franchise guy.
Listen, Marcus, that is certainly a reasonable takeaway until the Dak Prescott thing is signed, right? I mean, the numbers suggest to you that this is clearly about depth at the position, because one is a 1-year deal and the other one we're talking about, what, $30+ million a year that would make him the highest paid player in football. So you're right. It's nothing until it's something. And the problem is, because there's been so much ambiguity about Dak Prescott getting this deal done, I think that's why it's being looked at as maybe more than perhaps it is.
Yeah, and Trey, look, here's the deal for me. You can, it's football, right? We all been around this game. You can tell me something, but until I see you do it,
right,
it's not happening. Like, and I think, we talk about it on radio and on television, and we try to always give fans an inside look. MG Sr. been doing that for years. MG Jr. doing it, like being in a locker room. I'm telling you right now, if I was in the league and I was in the Dallas Cowboys locker room as a player, I would be like, dog, you see we just signed Andy Dalton? Hit Dak up and see if everything cool.
Along those
that
lines,
would be my response.
Yeah. Along those lines, let me go to another team, and if you're in that locker room, what you're thinking. Everybody, I know, really likes Gardner Minshew and the story that went on. But we've had guys that were starters in the leagues, number one picks in the leagues, all going to be backups, like a Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston, and Andy Dalton. And Jacksonville's been nowhere near these guys. If you're in that locker room, what's your thought process?
It's funny you say that, because that was something that I thought about with Andy Dalton signing. But I don't know, man. I'm still thinking that could be a spot for Cam. And people tell me, the system and it doesn't fit. Yeah, that make it fit if the player is better. But obviously they have confidence in Gardner Minshew. Obviously people have thrown out that they just going to, like, suck for Trevor Lawrence, like we had the conversation with
Mike Golic Jr. leading that bandwagon, by the way.
Yeah, like, so it could be a number of things, and I think it gets a pass because Garner did play well when he played in this short period of time. But with that being said, I don't think anybody believes, and this is fuel for Gardner Minshew. I don't think anybody believes he's going to be the long-term answer or the long-term starter for the Jacksonville Jaguars, which may be the case, which he may be. But I'm sure if they can get Cam and feel comfortable, or if they can, line this thing up right to get Trevor Lawrence, that's probably the picture they're looking at down the road.
Marcus Spears with us this morning. So, Marcus, as you survey the landscape here, what's more surprising to you, that Andy Dalton signs with the Cowboys, or that a former MVP and the number one overall pick in the 2011 draft is still looking for work in Cam Newton?
For me, it's Andy Dalton. And the reason, well, we obviously know Cam's health is a major issue, and I think that part of it is really the main thing. I think people still think Cam can play football, but can he play football? Like, as far as being available. The Andy Dalton thing is just perplexing to me. I mean, when you think about it, why does Andy Dalton want to be a backup when it was two jobs that could possibly put him in a starter role? And I understand his ties to Dallas, has a home here, and it may be to the point where he just wants to be comfortable coming to a situation with a good team, and if he possibly has to play, he has a chance to win. I get all of that. But to come and just accept a backup role after you've started for Cincinnati for this period of time, they just drafted Joe Burrow number 1 overall, and nothing in you wants to start in this league. There's no job that you think you could go win unless it's something here in Dallas that's available for you that we don't know about. That's the part that's perplexing for me. Has Andy Dalton just given up to say, I'm a backup? Or were there no takers? Were there no other teams that he could go in a locker room, into a QB room, and possibly be QB1? Like, guys, listen, this is a little different now. I don't want people to just let this fly by the wayside because there's an assumption that Dak will get a deal done. We've been talking about Dak getting a deal done for damn near a year and a half.
Correct.
And Andy Dalton just relenting to be a backup quarterback to Dak. To me, that is not my experience with starting quarterbacks in the NFL. I could be wrong, but all the guys that I've been around, they want to start. And if there's an opportunity out there to start, every player hits free agency looking for an opportunity to start and to play and to maximize earning potential, especially the spot that Andy Dalton's in. It's just, that's the part that really gives me pause and makes me think, what is happening?
Yeah, look, it's unusual. You're right, and it's certainly not the only one where we've seen this situation where we have Jameis signing a 1-year deal to go to New Orleans, and now Marcus Mariota is the backup with the Raiders. Marcus, we appreciate the time, my friend. Thank you.
My guys, I'll talk to y'all soon, man.
Support for the Best of Golic and Wingo podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Home today is so much more than it was yesterday, but at Rocket Mortgage, home is still all about you. During these challenging times, the top priority at Rocket Mortgage is the health and safety of the communities they serve. If you need mortgage assistance, their team is available 24/7 to answer questions and offer solutions. Whether that means saving money on your mortgage or finding a new way to navigate payments. From their home to yours, the team at Rocket Mortgage is with you. Visit rocketmortgage.com/Golic to learn more. Call for cost information and conditions. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
Brought to you by Capital One. You know how it feels when you've saved enough for that long-awaited home edition? Now, imagine saving enough for an edition on that edition. That's the feeling with Capital One, where a new savings account earns 5 times the national average. Capital One is helping you earn more towards your savings goals. This is Banking Reimagined. What's in your wallet? Capital One N.A., member FDIC.
Golic and Wingo.
It was all sort of one big giant Jell-O mold. It's very interesting where that went.
Joey Logano, NASCAR driver, 2018 NASCAR Cup Series champ. Joey, good morning. Hope you and yours are safe. Thanks for being with us. What was your reaction when you got the news that NASCAR is going to be revving things up again, literally and figuratively, with these 7 races in 11 days?
Well, first off, thanks for having me on. I hope you guys are doing well. We're hanging strong over here, and we're getting back to racing here pretty soon. And I've been fortunate enough to be on a lot of these phone calls with a lot of the leadership from our sport, and it's been pretty exciting and interesting conversations to be a part of them all and see where we're going with it. And I think some really good decisions were made. Yes, we're going to have to kind of change the way our normal weekend is at the racetrack, as far as practice and qualifying and how we get in there. But I will say that NASCAR has done a good job internally with some of the experts and doctors there, but also externally talking to, plenty of other doctors and experts and, trying to figure out how do we go back the safest way possible, and how do we, use the whole facility to help with social distancing. It's going to be interesting as a driver. Pretty much what we were told is we go to the racetrack and go to our motorhomes, and we don't leave there until we get in our race car. And we're responsible for all our gear, and so no one else touches that. So we just try to be as safe as possible. And honestly, I feel safer about going to the racetrack than I do going to the grocery store these days. So I'm excited to get back at the track. I know everyone in our industry is. We've been doing this iRacing thing, which has been good, but I tell you what, it's not like driving a real race car. So I'm ready to get back at it.
I'm sure you guys are, as we're talking to Joey Logano again, May 17th, 19th, and 20th at Darlington, 2 Cup races, an Xfinity race, and then 4 races in Charlotte, 2 Cups, an Xfinity, and a Trucks race. So, again, in 11 days, we have 7 races. So, and Joey, so let's dive into it a little bit. For you, I get it. Listen, social distancing for car drivers seems pretty easy. Outside of the fact that you're driving a car real fast with a bunch of other cars, not so easy. But the social distancing thing, I get it. Your motorhome to the car, and that's cool. But we know racing teams are there, and we see pit crews out there. We see a lot of guys working on the car that are awfully close together. What has been talked about as far as the rest of the team and how their procedure is going to be?
Yes, that's a great question. So there's scheduled times to when the team will be able to get into the racetrack to try to keep them separated. From what I hear, they're going to separate the cars where they're parked around the whole racetrack. Typically there's hundreds of thousands of fans around the whole racetrack. Well, it's going to be no fans, so we have the whole facility. You think about a 1.5 mile racetrack, we have the whole area to separate. And obviously the masks, hand sanitizer, all that stuff is mandatory. And they will be armed with their hand sanitizer throughout it. And there won't need to be as much work done to these race cars at the racetrack. Without practice and qualifying, it's pretty much unload them, push the cars to attack, make sure the integrity of our sport is still intact and that our cars are have the equal playing field that we're so used to. And then you go race. So, everyone's just got to do the best they can from that standpoint. And especially, I think, if you wear the mask and you're conscious of the situation, the best advice I heard is assume everybody has it. What would you do if you knew your neighbor right next to you had COVID-19? How would you act? And I think that's kind of the best advice you can give anyone at this point is what would you do? You would protect yourself. So that's kind of the approach we have to have.
Joey, I'm curious because this is obviously speaks to a larger issue that our country's had in this regard, but is there any sort of testing program or policy that's going to be in place as these races resume?
That I can't say that I know for sure on how all that is going to work. Some of that I think is still in the process of trying to figure out, but there would definitely be, from what I hear, obviously we'll be checking our temperatures and making sure there's no symptoms at the minimum. Any more than that, I can't say I know for sure. So we'll like you said, we'll take our extra precautions everywhere we can. And I'm sure if there's any symptoms with anyone, I'm sure it'll be a pretty big, result that we'll see some things change pretty quickly.
Joey Logano with us, NASCAR driver who had 2 wins in the 4 races this season before it was suspended in Las Vegas and Phoenix. So I guess, Joey, just from a personal perspective, what would be the thing that you would be most comfortable with in terms of what do you want to see out of this that would make you feel like, okay, this is all fine and good and we're trending in the right direction? What do you want to see out of NASCAR in terms of the results of this, and also specifically in terms of the things that you would feel comfortable with knowing that the most precautions are being taken?
Well, I think, you look at the opportunity ahead of us, right? And you see a crisis like this, and as unfortunate as it is and hard as it is for everyone, you got to look at the opportunity that's in front of us. And as you guys know, in the industry that you're in, there's a lot of eyeballs and ears listening and watching TV and radio, and there's no live sports. There's no competition at this point. So being first to the market is a huge advantage that we're going to try to take advantage of. So that's a huge moment for our sport to try to grow some new fans, give our existing fans what they want, and do it in the safest way. So when I think of what we can gain out of it, boy, it's hard to fathom what it can be. And then I think at the same time, boy, it's going to be kind of crazy for us because we've been, obviously sitting outside of a race car for over 2 months. And then we're going to barrel it down into turn 1 at 200 miles an hour with no practice and qualifying or anything. Hang on. So that's going to be a puckered up moment, as we say over here. We'll be hanging on tight.
Yeah, it's going to be a little different than the iRacing, I would say, no doubt about that. As Joey Logano joins us, NASCAR driver, again, May 17th in Darlington, the Cup Series. They start and go to May 27th, 7 races in those 11 days. And you're right, Joey, so many people cannot wait for this to get going. That being said, do you think, or have you talked to any drivers who are hesitant and may not race because they're just not sure?
Nah, I mean, we've had a lot of calls. We've had a call between all the drivers last week, too, as well. There's a lot of questions asked, but I wouldn't say anyone concerned enough to say they're not going to go race. I think everyone feels confident that everything's going to be okay. I think it's just more procedural things of how the weekend's supposed to go, where we're supposed to be, race format, yada, 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 all that stuff. So there's a lot of questions, as there should be, and especially, about how we protect ourselves. But I would say by the end of the call, everyone felt pretty confident that they're going to be okay.
Joey, the other portion of this is there are going to be no fans. And for anyone that's ever been to a NASCAR race, is such a huge part of an experience is the event and the environment around that race. So how do you expect that to go for guys being in that environment where that's no longer a part of it?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I expect that, there's no fans at the racetrack, but I think it'll be the largest crowd you ever raced in front of. I think that's what it's going to happen, is that you're going to have such a huge impact from the TV standpoint, and everyone watching on May 17th. I think that's going to be amazing. Now, it's going to feel weird because we're not going to know that because there's going to be no one at the racetrack. So I could imagine, some of the victory lane celebrations and things like that are going to feel weird. You're going to, from what I hear, is you're going to do an interview from inside the car on your radio from inside the car. And then you're going to go to victory lane and nobody's going to be there. You're going to grab the trophy and go back to your motorhome and drive home. So it's just going to be, that's going to be the weirdest feeling, I think, before the race starts and it being so quiet. It's just going to have a weird feel. But at the same time, it's going to be the largest crowd, possibly, that we'll ever race in front of.
Well, Joey, I can tell you, having just been through the virtual draft, there will be eyeballs. I can promise you that. Hey, Joey, tell us what your foundation is doing with their donation of $1 million to aid in the COVID-19 relief efforts.
Yeah, we've done some amazing things, and that's kind of going back to the opportunity in a crisis like this. This is where it is for us, and taking the opportunity to try to impact our community and fight through COVID-19 together, united. And we teamed up with Elevation Church down here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and put together $1 million fund. And we've been impacting a lot of different areas, whether it's from educational to giving the PPE to our first responders, from the financial side, helping people with meals and just any area we can. We had so many great ideas to do, but then we also realized now is not the time to come up with great ideas. We need to put things into action because the moment is now where people need help. So teaming up with a lot of different organizations and trying to disperse this money in the most efficient way to help people has been the most rewarding stuff that we can do at this moment, and getting things going and life back on track. Because we talk about everyone being in the same boat in this situation, and we're really not. We're in the same sea, but we're all in different boats because we can weather the storm in different ways depending on your situation. So helping where we can is most important right now.
Well, that's well said, and well done on your part as well. Joey, we appreciate the time, and we look forward to, seeing sports on May 17th. Should be a lot of fun. Thanks for being with us this morning.
All right, can't wait. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
All right, Joey.
Golic and Wingo.
Let's not expect too much. There's only one person out there that's expecting way too much out of this guy too early. We know who that is. It's his father.
Delighted to be joined by Jackie MacMullan, our ESPN senior NBA writer and commentator. Jackie, thanks for being with us this morning. To me, one of the takeaways from last night's episodes was basically that by any means necessary, Jordan would find that edge and would be relentless when he found that edge.
I know. It really is I think it's what separated him, honestly, from everybody else because of that mindset. And this goes all the way back to when he was a little kid playing pickup, or on the high school team. He didn't make varsity and thought, held on to that song. He mentioned it in his Hall of Fame speech, right?
Yeah.
So, and poor Clyde Drexler, you're right, because Clyde is really a terrific player and was having an unbelievable year that year. And he's I don't know if you guys know Clyde, but pretty quiet, unassuming guy, not a braggart by any means. And I thought it was so funny when I was talking to Danny Ainge this week. He was on that Portland team talking about he knew they were in trouble because everybody was doing these great comparisons, as we media like to do. Oh, these two guys are on the same par. They're the two best players in the world. And Danny said, I knew we were in trouble because everything Michael said was so deferential. Oh, yes, yeah. Clyde is a wonderful player. And he said, I knew him well enough to know he was going to try to seek and destroy Clyde, which is exactly what he did in that first game.
It's amazing what great players do to get chips on their shoulder.
It's very Brady-esque.
A lot of them are imagined, right? Some of them are real, but a lot of them are imagined. You just get yourself up into a lather.
And whatever works, right? You can imagine it all you want if it's going to work. How much imagining was there in just how bad the gambling situation was to where Jordan would shut off the media and really had a bad situation there for a while, and just how deep that gambling went?
It was a very hot topic. It was a legitimate topic at the time, I feel. There was a lot of smoke, and I thought Jordan's answers in this documentary were very interesting. And what he's saying is true. He didn't break any laws. He had a competitive problem. I loved that because that is exactly true. And but I think what happened was he was the darling for so long, and then finally there was a little bit of a smudge on those very squeaky clean Air Jordans. And the media assault was relentless. I was around for it. And then the combination of when his father, of course, was very tragically murdered. He told me many years later, within minutes, people were connecting that to his gambling. And he never forgave the people. You talk about, slights, real or imagined. He never forget or forgave the many people that wrote about that or even insinuated that. His father had just passed away, and I really think it drove him from the game.
Talking to Jackie MacMullan, our ESPN senior NBA writer. Jackie, let's take that idea of holding a grudge or managing to remember everything and apply it to the 92 Dream Team. Is there any world where you're believing that Michael Jordan didn't have some hand in Isiah Thomas not being a part of that team?
Oh, there's no question he had a hand in it, but there were many hands. That's the thing I think people have to remember. I thought the most important thing that Jordan said regarding that was when he talked about the camaraderie of the Dream Team and how well everybody got along, and Charles mentioned it also last night on our network with Scott Van Pelt. And I do think that it's a valid point to say that that dynamic would have been different if Isiah had been on that team, simply because he had so many axes to grind. He and Bird had issues. He and Magic, when Magic was HIV positive, he really felt that Isiah wasn't having his back during that time, which turned out, to have a lifelong relationship be damaged. There was a lot of bodies, and because there's no way on this earth that Isiah Thomas should have been left off that team for his ability. And everybody acknowledges that, including Michael. And Michael says, I hate him. And he does. He's not kidding.
Well, at least he's honest about it.
Yeah. Right. That's it.
And the other thing, Jackie, I took away from this is just how much they wore out Tony Kukoc because of Jerry Krause. I mean, it seems like Jerry Krause was always looking for the next thing because he wasn't the guy that drafted Jordan. So he was always trying to find that next thing that he could bring in and say, listen, I did this to keep the transition going. And it was so evident that in that first meeting, they met up again for the gold medal and Kukoc played better. But in that first meeting against that team at the 92 Olympics, that Jordan and Pippen were just going to take it to Tony.
Well, and that's because they couldn't take it to Jerry Krause on the court. That's what they would have preferred to do, but that wasn't available to them. And I have great sympathy for Tony Kukoc, and you see this interview all those years later, you can see how wounded he still is about it. And he was right. They didn't even know him. They had never met him. They didn't know what kind of person he was, his background, from whence he came, and it was a terrible, the former Yugoslavia, what they were all going through there. Teammates for years on their national team then became mortal enemies overnight because you're either a Serb or Croatian, and all of those things, all of that is a backdrop. But I will say this, once Tony got to the Bulls and once he started playing with Scotty and Michael, they recognized his value, and it was a different tenor. But if you're a Kukoc, do you ever forget that's how you were treated the first time you met them? Crazy stuff.
Jackie, when this thing is all said and done, is there going to be anybody out there that will softer feel for Jerry Krause and say, oh, he wasn't as bad guy as we all thought he was going to be?
Well, it's the one thing I would say is it's a little bit of a shame, he's not here to defend himself. And I will say this also, I knew Jerry very well. He really did have a softer side to him. I used to say to Jerry, when all this was going on, I would say, you're one of the best executives in the game. Don't keep telling us. Let someone else say it for you. I think that would have solved a lot of his issues. He just was so hell-bent on making sure everybody knew that the organization and all the work he did, and you know how this is, the best praise is when it comes from someone else. If you start talking about yourself, how great you are, all that does is turn everybody off. He was never going to be one of the guys. He wasn't an athlete. He was an easy mark for both Michael and Scotty, and they had their reasons for disliking him, for wanting to break up something they had built so strongly. And to your point about always looking for the next thing, remember now, he plucked Phil Jackson out of the CBA and brought him aboard as an assistant, had him, alongside Tex Winter. And, he became convinced, well, if I hadn't discovered Phil Jackson, he'd never would have made it. Well, I don't believe that. I don't know if you guys do. I mean, come on. Phil Jackson was a pretty talented guy. Sooner or later, he was going to get it. He was going to get there.
Yeah. The other thing, I mean, like you saw the one in the post-game celebration. He never once mentioned the players. I mean, the organization.
I know. That was what a clip, right? What a clip.
Just at one point acknowledge the five guys on the floor and maybe you're good. There. No. So we'll see what happens and how that relationship evolves in the next couple of episodes. Jackie, always good to talk to you. We love your insight on this. Thanks for being with us this morning.
All right, guys. Have a wonderful day.
Golic
makes me want to vomit and then punch you square in the face.
And Wingo.
Oh, he's saucy today. Our NBA analyst and one of the great mullet wearers of all time when he played, our Timmy Legler. Tim, good morning. Hope you and your family are safe, but it's pretty clear as we're watching these episodes about the Dream Team and who wasn't and wasn't on there, that it wasn't just Michael, although it was a lot of Michael, but a lot of players weren't cool with the idea of Isiah Thomas being on that Dream Team.
Yeah, for sure. Good morning, gentlemen. Yeah, you're 100% right. And I've commented on this before that there are ramifications, right, to being part of a team that is viewed the way that Pistons team was viewed. So, and that is it. They played a certain way because they felt like that was their best chance based on their personnel to be able to, reach their peak and win championships, and they did it twice. But having become that team and adopted that personality, you now are going to face some consequences. And for Isiah Thomas, that was the consequence. And whether Michael Jordan, specifically said his name, and it sounds like he didn't, based on what Rod Thorne has had to say, based on what Michael Jordan said in the documentary, he never specifically singled Isiah Thomas out and said, hey, he's on the team, I'm not. But he made it very clear by asking who is going to be on the team. He made it clear how he felt, and there were other guys on that team that felt that way. And I think the dynamic and the chemistry would have changed if Isiah had been on it. Clearly, he was talented enough and should have had a place on the team based on talent. But there are things associated with that team that Isiah Thomas carried with him that prevented that from happening. And I don't think there's any way around it, regardless of whether Michael Jordan actually, uttered that sentence to Rod Thorne. Everybody understood it. That was the dynamic around the Pistons at the time, and the dynamic between Michael Jordan and Isiah Thomas.
So then I asked this question about the Pistons, and then we saw some of the Bulls and the Knicks playing that physical ball as well. Because we talk a lot about the style of play today and the style of play back then, how you didn't drive the lane, you ended up on the ground. The way it's explained sometimes, is it overblown? Was there just a couple of teams that really, really played that way, or was really that prevalent in the entire league?
The league was definitely, you saw more of that league-wide. Obviously, that was the nature of defense in the NBA. It's just that the Detroit Pistons and then the Knicks in the mid-'90s, and I would even say the Pistons were probably on a different level all by themselves in terms of the number of plays that would now, I think, or in any era, be deemed dangerous. I mean, I think that's the difference we're talking about here. It's one thing to be physical, and the league was physical, and it was much harder to get to the rim, and you were going to get hit, you were going to get put on your back more often because you didn't have to worry about replay where refs are going over and taking a look at it. You got one look at it in real time if you were an official. And if a guy ended up on his back, most likely that was going to be 2 free throws, no flagrant, no suspension, no replay where you could eject a guy. You weren't going to have any of that. So the league definitely had a defensive concept that was more in line with what you're watching. And I played the entire decade of the 90s, and I know it was a completely different defensive mindset. But the Pistons, they had a lot of plays that took place that you would label dangerous. There were guys, really could have been hurt. And to me, one of the things that stood out to me so far through this documentary is it's a miracle that Michael Jordan made it right 7 years of his career and finally breaks through with his first championship without suffering some catastrophic injury. It really is, because they were coming with bad intention, and they've said it. Look, we're going to get to him before he takes off. We're not giving him a chance. And to do that against a player that athletic, that strong, that quick, that means you're going to have to come. You're going to have to make sure he is hit hard and he is wrapped up. And so for a guy that's, 200, little over 200 pounds at that time, flying through the air the way that he was, and the number of hits and falls that he took, it's a miracle that he didn't end up with some sort of major injury that required surgery that could have potentially altered his career in some way.
Talking to Tim Legler, our ESPN NBA analyst and former NBA player here on Golic and Wingo. And Tim, I guess from that incredible feat on the court to some of the off-the-court things that were discussed last night in the documentary and Michael Jordan's gambling, for lack of a better term. I won't label it a problem or not, although that was some of the discussion. I guess I'm just curious because we hear about how much gambling tends to go on in pro locker rooms in general. Was it in particular with Michael Jordan something that was a topic of conversation around the league that anyone else really discussed?
No, not in reference to Michael Jordan. I mean, look, it was a different time. I mean, I was on a lot of charters, and when I played in the league in the 90s, where I saw a lot of money get exchanged in card games. Like, that was just the way of the world. I love the story that Paxson, or was it Paxson or Purdue, was telling
Purdue, how they blackjack.
Yeah, they were playing blackjack for $1 a hand, and they were playing for a completely different level of the other end with Harper and Michael Jordan, those guys, and Scotty. And so then Michael would want to come back and play with their $1 a hand games just because he was so addicted to just playing. He just wanted to play, and he said, "I want your money in my pocket." That was very common of what was going on NBA flights and hotel rooms. I mean, pitching quarters I played a lot of. I was involved in a lot of those games myself, man. Hotel rooms on the road. That was the game that you were playing. You saw some of that with Michael having fun with the security guys and trying to get the quarter closest to the wall. And then the card games on the planes. I mean, I played on teams where they would keep like a little, almost like a journal for if you're on a 10-day trip, and it was almost like a ledger, like an accountant would carry around for the money that was like, changing hands in card games every time you got on the charter. So in terms of did people specifically, talk about Michael Jordan and gambling? No, because it was a lot of guys around the league that were, gambling and playing cards, and I didn't see anything that blew me away. And certainly you're talking about a different level financially with Michael Jordan and what he was able to afford and what he wanted to do. But no, it never came up one time because it wasn't like it would have been an outlier that Michael Jordan's playing in some high-stakes card games. I think there were a lot of guys doing it.
Not only that, but the other thing I took away from this is that Michael was going to do whatever it took for him to get a psychological edge, whether it was Clyde Drexler can't be compared to me, or Charles Barkley may be the MVP, but he's not me, or Jerry Krause is thinking Tony Kukoc is the next me. He ain't me. He ain't Pippen. Whatever he felt like he needed, he was going to use that to get that ultimate edge and then just dog that guy whenever he was playing him.
Yeah, that's a great point. It did stand out. He also made a comment. I guess he did the same thing with Dan Marley. Where, he said that
with Marley, a great defensive player.
Marley was a stopper, and so that offended him. He took that personally as an offense. As an insult to him. Same thing with Drexler. And even Barkley said, I was really ticked off that he got the MVP that year. I thought that should have been mine. So that was motivation. The thing that's so great about him is, so that's I think is a common theme with athletes that are the top of their field and all-time greats. They are constantly challenging themselves, and they are addicted to competing, and they hate losing even more than they love winning. But the other thing that makes him so special, and I was reminded of it watching this doc, and I lived that era, and I played against those teams, but you forget sometimes, he never let you down, man. He never disappointed when he had to have a big moment. And he just never disappointed. He did not have a bad game at a time when they critically needed it. And so for a guy to be able to know that every defense was geared towards stopping him specifically, to be able to elevate his game to that point, to come back from 2-0 against the Knicks and do what he did the rest of that series, to average 41 points a game in the finals against the guy that won the MVP that year. For him to be able to just not only want to elevate it because he was so competitive, but then actually come through and not disappoint and not lay an egg at a critical time. And that's why the guy was 6-0 in the finals, and that's why he's the greatest player of all time.
Yeah, it's one thing to want it, it's nothing to execute it, and he did both of those to perfection. Legs, always good to talk to you, my friend. Hope you and yours are well and safe.
Everybody's great.
This has been the Best of Golic and Wingo podcast. You can listen or subscribe on the ESPN app, Apple Podcasts, or just ask your smart speaker to play Golic and Wingo. Plus, you can check the guys out live weekday mornings from 6 to 10 Eastern on ESPN Radio and on ESPN News.